A love that refused to die even when the body did after the storm is a hauntingly beautiful story of loss, art, and rebirth. It's not about forgetting someone, it's about remembering them differently, not as pain, but as light that teaches you how to begin again. Rain slicked the narrow street like a silver wound under the dying light, and in that reflection walked Ayaan, shoulders hunched beneath a cheap black jacket, his breath forming small ghosts that vanished before they reached the world that had already forgotten him. The city's hum was distant, like a pulse too faint to save, and the sound of his worn shoes against the wet concrete was the only proof that he still existed, still moved, still tried, each step a question without an answer, each breath a negotiation with the emptiness inside. He passed shuttered shops, dim windows, lives continuing behind curtains where laughter didn't belong to him anymore. His phone buzzed once, her name flashing, but he didn't answer, didn't need to, because words had long lost their power. And silence was the only language left that didn't betray him. Inside the small cafe at the corner, where he used to wait for Mira, everything was the same, the crooked bulb flickering, the faint jazz bleeding from an old radio, the smell of coffee that once meant warmth and now only reminded him of endings. And when he pushed open the door, the bell above it trembled like a heartbeat too fragile to continue. The barista, a tired man with kind eyes, looked up but said nothing, just nodded, as if they both knew some unspoken grief connected them. Ayaan sat in the corner booth, his usual seat, the one facing the window. The one where Mira once traced constellations on the fogged glass with her finger and told him that even broken stars still shine. He could almost see her there, not as a memory, but as a ghost stitched into the light, smiling in that quiet, defiant way that used to save him, until the rain erased her from the window pane and the world became just noise again. On the table lay a sketchbook, edges frayed, pages filled with moments that never survived time, faces, hands, fragments of their love turned into graphite confessions, and he flipped through them as if trying to find proof that what they had was real, that he hadn't imagined it all. Outside, a siren wailed, sharp and distant, like the cry of something dying, maybe hope, maybe forgiveness, and Ayaan pressed his thumb against the page until it smudged, blurring her face into shadow. The cafe light flickered once, then steadied, casting a soft amber over him, and for a moment it felt like a stage, one where he was the last actor left after the audience had gone home, still performing a love that ended long ago. Then the door opened again, a gust of rain sweeping in, and with it, Myra's sister, soaked, trembling, eyes red not from the weather, but from the kind of truth that breaks everything it touches. She didn't need to speak, her silence was louder than the thunder outside, but she handed him a folded letter, its edges soft from being held too tightly. Ayaan stared at it for a long moment before taking it, his hand shaking as though holding it might burn him, and when he finally looked up, her eyes met his with something heavier than grief, pity. He opened the letter slowly, the ink already bled in places, words bruised by tears. If I could have stayed, I would have. Some storms don't wait for shelter. His lips parted, but no sound came, only the whisper of rain against glass, and in that sound, a memory of her laughter, the kind that used to make even pain feel holy. The camera would linger there, on the letter trembling in his hands, the rain outside blurring the world, and his reflection in the window merging with the ghost of hers, two souls divided by time, still trying to exist in the same breath. Still waiting for one more sunrise that never came. The night dragged on like a wound that refused to close, and Ayaan sat beneath the dim cafe light long after the chairs had been flipped, the barista gone, the city emptied of sound except for the dripping of rain outside, each drop a slow countdown to something he didn't understand yet. The letter lay open before him, its words bleeding into the paper like veins of regret, and in their softness, he felt the ache of all the things left unsaid. Apologies never spoken, promises broken by time, love swallowed by silence, until he realized he was trembling not from cold, but from memory. He left the cafe without looking back, the bell above the door giving a hollow farewell, and stepped into the misted street where the neon signs buzzed faintly like dying insects. The air was heavy with that scent, wet asphalt, metal, and rain. The same scent that clung to her the night she left, and he followed it now as if it might lead him to where the story had gone wrong. Back in his small apartment, a single bulb, a bed unmade for days, sketches scattered like forgotten thoughts. Ayaan pinned the letter to the wall beside Myra's drawings, her handwriting curling between his lines, two artists still speaking in different tongues of sorrow. He lit a cigarette he didn't want and stared at the smoke twisting upward, remembering how Mira once said smoke was just fire learning to let go. His phone buzzed again, not her, not even her sister this time, but a message from an unknown number. "You don't know everything. Meet me at the pier. Midnight." For a second, he thought it was a cruel joke, but the ache in his chest told him otherwise. The same ache that warned him truth was coming, and truth never came gently. At the pier, the sea was a living thing, dark, restless, murmuring against the wood, and under the flickering lamp stood a man he hadn't seen in years, Ayaan, Myra's old friend, the one she used to call her mirror. They greeted each other not with words, but with silence stretched thin by guilt. Ayaan looked older, his face carved by sleepless nights, eyes holding something dangerous, not malice, but knowledge. "You think she left because of you?" Ayaan finally said, voice low, almost drowned by the wind. Ayaan's jaw tightened. "Didn't she?" Ayaan shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "You were her reason to stay. The reason she couldn't." The words landed like stones in his chest, heavy and senseless. "She was sick, Ayaan. The kind that doesn't show until it's too late. She didn't tell you because she knew you'd break trying to save her." Ayaan stared at him, the world tilting, the sea roaring louder as if to swallow the truth whole. "You're lying," he whispered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Ayaan took out his phone, opened a video. Myra's face appeared, pale but smiling, speaking softly. "If you're watching this, I couldn't find the strength to say goodbye. Don't hate me for it. I wanted you to remember the warmth, not the dying." The sound of her voice shattered something final inside him, grief giving way to understanding, love melting into guilt, and for the first time in months, he let himself cry, not in silence, but loudly, brokenly, like a man who had carried the wrong blame too long. The camera would linger here too, Ayaan beneath the broken lamplight, rain washing his tears into the sea, the letter still clutched in his fist as the screen fades to black, leaving behind the echo of her voice and the cruel, beautiful truth that sometimes love's last act of kindness is to leave before it destroys. The storm hit the city before dawn, tearing through the coastline like an uninvited truth, and Ayaan stood at his window watching the world unravel in sheets of lightning. His reflection split between the glass and the ghost of Myra's smile behind him, because ever since the pier, sleep had become a stranger and silence had grown teeth. He had replayed her voice 100 times, each word digging deeper, each pause revealing what she never said. That her leaving wasn't abandonment, but mercy, and that mercy was just another name for love that hurts. The sea had taken something from him that night, not Mira, but the version of himself that believed he was the victim, and as thunder cracked the horizon, he realized that grief wasn't what he'd been carrying, it was guilt masquerading as devotion. An anchor he'd mistaken for memory. He spent the next days wandering through their old haunts, the art gallery where she once made him promise to create something that lived beyond pain, the mural wall they painted together, now half-faded but still breathing color through the cracks, and finally, the hospital records office, where he searched for her name, trembling fingers turning pages that smelled of antiseptic and endings. The truth was there in black ink, the diagnosis, the timeline, the quiet war she fought alone, and as he read it, his knees gave way, not because she was gone, but because she had carried so much without ever asking him to share the weight. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the city strangely clean, as if grief had been rinsed from its veins, and in that sterile silence, he made a decision, not to forgive her, not to forgive himself, but to understand her. That night, he returned to the pier with his sketchbook and paints, setting up under the same lamp where she had once stood like a shadow between love and leaving. His hands shook as he painted, not from cold but from release, every stroke a confession, every color a piece of what they'd lost. He painted her not as she was when she died, but as she lived, wild hair, eyes full of questions, laughter caught mid-breath, and behind her, the sea, not devouring but cradling, like it finally learned how to hold without taking. As dawn bled into the sky, the mural came alive under the rising sun, and people began to gather, strangers, silent, drawn by something they couldn't name, their faces lit by awe and grief, and the kind of understanding only beauty can summon. Then, among the crowd, Ayaan saw Myra's sister again, holding a small wooden box. She stepped forward and placed it by his feet. "She wanted you to have this," she said softly. Inside was a tiny vial filled with sand, and a note that simply read, "For the day you learn to let go." His hand closed around it, and in that touch was every word they never said, every goodbye that never needed to be spoken. The wind rose again, carrying salt and sunlight, and for the first time, Ayaan didn't resist. He let it take the letter, the sketches, the ashes of guilt, watching them scatter into the horizon like birds finally remembering how to fly. The camera would pull back slowly, the mural behind him glowing in morning light, the sea whispering beneath it, and Ayaan standing still, no longer lost, but not yet free, caught in that fragile space between heartbreak and healing. Where endings learn to become beginnings, the mural had turned into something more than art. It had become a shrine, a wound painted into beauty, and over the next few days, people kept coming, leaving flowers, letters, even fragments of their own losses beneath. It, as if Myra's face had become a mirror for everyone who'd ever loved and lost. Ayaan watched them quietly, sleepless and hollow, his hands still stained with paint, his eyes searching the horizon as though waiting for her to step out of the sea one last time. But with every sunrise came a different kind of weight, not grief anymore, but the fear of what came after it, of what it meant to live again when the one you lived for was gone. One evening, as dusk smeared the sky in bruised gold, Myra's sister found him sitting by the mural, the half-empty box beside him, the sand vial in his palm. "You've turned her into something immortal," she said softly, but Ayaan shook his head, eyes distant. "No, I've trapped her. I painted her to keep her here. But maybe that's not love anymore. Maybe it's just me refusing to let go." She knelt beside him, her voice barely above the waves. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, Ayaan. It means giving her the peace she gave you." He looked at her, pain flickering like lightning behind his gaze. "And what about me? What do I do when the only thing that made me feel alive is gone?" She hesitated, then whispered, "You live." Because she couldn't. The words broke something final inside him, and before he could answer, thunder rolled in the distance, dark clouds gathering over the sea like a memory returning to claim what it left behind. The wind tore through the pier, whipping the pages of his sketchbook into the air, scattering Myra's drawings into the storm, and instinctively, he ran after them, chasing pieces of her, of himself, until he reached the edge where would met water, heart pounding, eyes stinging with rain and tears. For a moment, it felt like the night she left, the same roar, the same helplessness, and as lightning split the sky, he stood trembling between past and present, realization dawning like fire in his chest. He had spent so long holding on to her memory that he had forgotten how to be one himself. The storm raged louder, daring him to choose, drown in what was or step into what could be, and as the wind screamed through the pier, he whispered her name one last time, the sound torn away by the sea, leaving only silence and the beginning of something unnamed. The storm reached its peak, as if the heavens themselves were mourning, waves colliding with the pier in violent rhythm, and Ayaan stood at its trembling edge, soaked to the bone, every muscle in his body quivering under the weight of memory and thunder. His sketches, Myra's sketches, fluttered around him like wounded birds, their ink bleeding, faces dissolving into the rain, and he realized with a hollow ache that this was what love had become, not preservation, but surrender. A constant drowning disguised as devotion. The wind screamed through the ruins of his thoughts, carrying echoes of her laughter, her voice woven into the chaos, whispering between lightning strikes, "Some storms don't wait for shelter," and for a heartbeat, he saw her not as a ghost, but as light refracted through the rain, standing where the sea met the sky, her hair wild, her eyes unafraid, looking at him the way she used to when she believed he could be more than his pain. His body moved before thought could intervene. He stepped forward, one foot, then another, the waves rising like arms ready to pull him into their cold forgiveness. But just as the pier groaned beneath him, his eyes fell on the vial of sand clenched in his fist. The one Mira left behind, the one he never understood until now. Inside it, the grains caught a shard of lightning glimmering, alive, and suddenly he remembered what she said once while painting beside him: "Every storm ends. You just have to survive long enough to see it." The world narrowed then. The sound of rain became distant, his breath slowed, the chaos outside and inside merging into stillness, and in that suspended second, he understood. Love wasn't meant to anchor him to what was lost, but to teach him how to move even when everything breaks. With trembling fingers, he uncorked the vial and let the sand spill into the wind, golden against the dark, scattering across the storm like tiny fragments of sunrise. Each grain caught the lightning's glow, dissolving midair. 1,000 little farewells carried to the horizon. The storm roared louder as if protesting, but something inside him softened, the tightness in his chest easing, the weight on his heart uncoiling, and he sank to his knees, gasping, laughing through tears as rain washed his face clean. Behind him, the mural of Mira began to bleed under the downpour, her painted smile melting, colors running into the wood like veins returning to the earth. But instead of despair, he felt awe. She was leaving him again. Yes, but this time by choice. And this time he was ready to let her. The sea surged higher, swallowing the pier's edges, thunder cracking above like applause, and in that chaos, he screamed her name, not in grief, but in gratitude, a raw, primal sound that split the air and disappeared into the wind. The moment hung, electric and infinite, as if the universe paused to witness the unmaking of a man and the birth of another. And then silence. The storm began to ease, the sky opening into a bruised pink dawn, waves retreating, the world exhaling. Ayaan rose slowly, soaked, shaking, his breath visible in the chill, and when he looked toward the horizon, the clouds had parted enough to reveal a single beam of sunlight piercing through, falling directly on the remnants of the mural. Her face was gone, but in its place, the light painted something new, a shimmer, faint but alive, where her eyes had been. He smiled through the ache, whispering into the morning, "You made it," as if she could still hear him. The camera would circle him from behind, the sea stretching endless ahead, the pier splintered but standing, his silhouette framed against the newborn light, before fading into a slow aerial pullback, the mural, the broken sketches drifting on the tide. And Ayaan walking away barefoot along the pier, every step erasing the ghost of who he was, every step toward a life he never thought he'd earn, until the frame holds on the empty horizon, quiet, trembling, infinite, where loss and love finally blur into something holy. The morning the sea finally calmed, Ayaan returned to the pier where the storm had once tried to take everything from him, and for a moment, the silence felt like a stranger, too clean, too wide. As though even the wind was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. The mural was gone now, erased by the tide, leaving behind only the faint memory of color soaked into the planks, ghost-like, tender, eternal. And yet something about its absence felt right, like closure finally learning how to speak without sound. He sat on the edge of the pier, legs dangling over the rippling water, sketchbook balanced on his lap, watching the horizon pulse with pale light. It wasn't the angry, violent blue he remembered, but soft and forgiving, as if the sea itself had been reborn. For months he had lived in the orbit of loss, chasing ghosts, painting grief, but now there was only stillness, and in that stillness, truth. Mira had been gone long before she left. The sickness that hollowed her had been a secret kindness, sparing him from watching her fade in real time, and though her departure had broken him, he now understood. She hadn't left to abandon him. She'd left to give him back to himself. His hand hovered over the blank page, trembling slightly, but not from pain this time, from anticipation, and when the pencil finally touched paper, he didn't draw her face or the storm or the sea. He drew a horizon. Infinite, quiet, waiting. And as the first bird crossed the sky, he smiled, a small, private smile that carried both loss and peace, because for the first time, the world no longer felt like something ending, but something beginning again. Behind him, footsteps approached softly, Myra's sister, holding a small envelope, the edges weathered, the paper smelling faintly of salt and lavender. "I found this in her old journal," she said, handing it to him. Ayaan took it carefully, his chest tightening as he unfolded the fragile note. Myra's handwriting curved across the page like sunlight breaking through clouds. "If you ever return to the sea, don't come to mourn me. Come to meet the version of yourself I always saw, the one who could survive even without me." His vision blurred, tears hot and sudden, but he didn't look away this time. He let them fall freely, each drop landing on the paper like punctuation to everything left unsaid. The tide reached for the pier, gentle now, brushing against the wood as though offering a final goodbye, and Ayaan whispered into the wind, "I made it, Mira." The sea shimmered, just once, as if answering. He closed the letter, tucked it into his sketchbook, and stood, eyes fixed on the horizon where sunlight and water blended into one endless promise. The camera would follow him as he walked down the pier, barefoot, his steps steady but unhurried, every frame holding the quiet power of a man who has finally stopped running from himself. The world behind him blurred into color and light, laughter in the distance, the smell of rain replaced by salt and hope, and as he reached the end of the pier, he turned once more to face the camera. Myra's voice, faint and warm, echoing one last time. "See? Even after the storm, you found the light." If this story touched your soul, don't let it drift away. Like, share, and subscribe for more cinematic tales that remind us love doesn't end with goodbye, it transforms with time. Comment below, what storm taught you to see the light differently? Your story might become our next film.